I, Chris Walker, was in the kitchen putting the finishing touches on dinner. My wife, Paula, was away for the weekend with her friends, celebrating their upcoming 30th birthdays. I was eagerly awaiting her return. We had been married for 5 years, and this was her last big hurrah before we embarked on the next chapter of our lives, starting a family. Everything was meticulously planned. A few years back, we had moved into our new home. The house was old and required a lot of work when we bought it, but we got a fantastic deal. I tackled most of the renovations myself, saving a considerable amount on materials thanks to careful planning. This left us with a surprising surplus of resources. Paula and I were a typical couple. We met on a warm summer day at a backyard barbecue hosted by her brother. She was 22 and I was 23. Although her birthday was in September and mine in April, neither of us had gone to college. I worked as a truck driver for a local transport company, and she worked at a local bank. We weren't driven by the desire to become millionaires, but as a couple, we felt incredibly content. Our marriage was strong, but over the past few months, tension had crept in. Paula was anxious about the responsibilities of motherhood, and it didn't help that some of her friends weren't married and lived a carefree lifestyle. One friend, in particular, annoyed me. Steph. She was the quintessential party girl, always seen with a different guy. Once I asked her about her aspirations, and she replied, "I want to be a woman who sleeps around." I figured she was pretty good at it, judging by her track record. I heard Paula's car pull up, and I checked the timer on the oven. The lasagna would be ready in 10 minutes. The red wine was already open and breathing, the garlic bread toasted and cooling, and the salad was in the fridge, ready to be served. As I turned around, Paula walked through the door, and I immediately knew she had cheated on me. The smug smile on her face, the glint in her eyes, screamed, "I did it, and there's nothing you can do about it." Her carefree strut said, "You'll never find out." I stood frozen, and she met my gaze. In an instant, she realized I had figured it out. She quickly averted her eyes from my intense stare, dropped her bag, and ran towards me, saying, "Chris, I need you so much. Take me." I dodged her advance with a quick sidestep and replied, "No thanks, that's not necessary." Her face went blank. She didn't know what to do next. I'm Paula Walker, and I'm about to turn 30. I'm ready to become a mother. The decision to have children came almost unconsciously about 6 months ago. Chris and I were making love. It was slow and gentle. For some reason, I whispered in his ear, "Oh God, I forgot to take my pill this morning." His reaction surprised me. The slow caress stopped, and he became almost primal. The only way to describe what happened next was sheer passion, and our mutual climax was mind-blowing. When we both came back to our senses, I began running my fingers through the hair on his chest and said, "Judging by that performance, someone wants to be a dad." About 2 years ago, I had brought up the topic of having children, but Chris had brushed me off. He was focused on the house renovations, and he was right. The house wasn't suitable for a baby and could even be dangerous for young children, so I didn't push the subject further. This time, it seemed like the door was open. Chris smiled. "Did you really forget to take your pill this morning?" I laughed. You know I didn't mean it, but my body told me to say it. I wanted a baby. No, that's not right. I wanted your baby, and my body needed to know your reaction. I've always been a bit of a planner, so we began to map things out. One of the key factors for me was choosing a time when our child would be one of the oldest in their class. Yes, I read all the studies, and having a child who is the oldest in class does help. So the plan was to stop taking the pill in 4 months. Only after I told the girls that we were thinking about starting a family did I realize the enormity of what I was doing. I had always been the quiet one in the group. All of my friends, especially Steph, had been dating since high school. Their boyfriends came and went in an endless stream. Steph, in particular, felt it was her duty to sleep with as many men as possible. I, on the other hand, was the good girl. I saved myself for my wedding day. I had a few boyfriends, but most relationships didn't go anywhere because I refused to have intimate relations. I started to wonder if I had made a mistake by making that choice, and I felt like I was missing out on all the fun. I decided to loosen up and live as freely as the others, And then that's when the party happened, and Chris came into my life. The party was taking place in my brother's backyard, and I was helping his wife prepare sauces for the burgers when he barged into my life. I didn't think he noticed me, but I definitely noticed him. My sister-in-law glanced at me, then at him, and asked, "Do you like him?" I just nodded but kept staring. She laughed and added, "Relax, girl. His name is Chris. Give me 10 minutes and I'll ask Alan to introduce you." Alan was my brother, and sure enough, he arranged things so that I ended up next to Chris about 15 minutes after he arrived. My first impression was that Chris liked me just as much as I liked him. We spent most of the day together, and by the time he left, we had already planned our first date. After Chris left, Steph came up to me. "You made your move, so how did it go?" I couldn't help but smile as I replied, "I felt it. He has to be mine." "Go on, big girl, and take that cherry," was all Steph said, and that's exactly what I did. I hid nothing from Chris, and I was so glad that by our 4th date, things progressed to a physical connection. Our nearly 7 years together have been wonderful, but realizing that I would soon be tied down made me feel an itch that whispered, "You need something else, something just for yourself." I couldn't talk to Chris about this because I knew how he would react. If he even suspected that I might cheat, he would abandon the idea of having kids with me and might even divorce me. I would never ask for permission to have an affair, so I started talking to Steph. She was horrified. "How could you even think about that? Have you fallen out of love with Chris? For heaven's sake, no!" I squealed. "I love Chris. I want to build a family with him and be with him forever. That's what I want for us. But there's a part of me that wants to feel like my body can make more than just one man happy. I can't explain it, but I want to have memories like yours about other men. Chris had plenty of women before me, and I need more than just one." "Oh God, Paula, you're crazy," Steph exclaimed, especially now. "Why didn't you do this when you were single?" "I hope you're still taking your pills, because if you do this and get pregnant by someone else, it'll be the biggest disaster of your life." "Of course, I'm still taking the pills," I stammered. How could she even think I'd want a child with another man? If I stopped now, the baby would be too young to start school at the right time. No, I planned to quit in 4 months, and then an idea struck me. In 6 months, we're throwing a huge party for my 30th birthday. I'll keep taking the pills until then, do what I want, and then when I get back home, I'll stop. The timing will be perfect. I can even tell Chris I'm delaying it by 2 months to make sure that even a premature baby would be ready for the school year. "How long have you been planning this?" Steph asked, disbelief clear in her voice. "Since we decided to have kids," I replied. "Will you help me?" I pleaded. "Do I have a choice?" Steph replied. "I suspect you'll go through with it whether I help or not, but if I don't, you're definitely going to get caught. So I'm begging you to drop this. Stop taking the pills and get pregnant with Chris. You don't need this, and you'll regret it. I know you'll regret it." And so the deal was made. Steph agreed to invite a couple of her male friends to join us for the big birthday party. The other girls were just as upset as Steph, but agreed to keep the secret from Chris. As the party approached, I wanted everything to go perfectly. Ideally, I would have 2 different men, one on Friday and the other on Saturday. I told Steph about my plan, and she just shook her head, saying, "This is getting out of hand. You've gone from 1 to 2. Sure, the guys will be happy to sleep with you on different nights, but I'm worried about you." I was overjoyed. The realization of what I was planning brought me an incredible sense of satisfaction, especially when I cuddled up to Chris at home. I just felt clever. About 2 months before the party, something started to bother me. I couldn't quite figure out what it was. Paula was usually bursting with excitement when she had plans to go somewhere with the girls, and by now I expected her to have a full itinerary. But I had nothing. Her calls to Steph were made away from me. Paula loves to plan outings, and she usually pulls out maps of local national parks, showing me the route she's planning. I hadn't seen anything. I was only told the name of the hotel, and that was it. Normally, I'd hear about a spa, the fitness center, even bars and restaurants. I'd get the full plan. There were also other things about our life that bothered me. Most notably, Paula's decision not to stop using birth control until after the party. Paula had always been meticulous about planning. She had been tracking her fertility with charts for 2 years, ever since she first mentioned having children. She had already researched schools in the area and timed everything so that the baby would be born just a few days after the cutoff date for school enrollment. She wanted the child to be as old as possible when they started school. She had even analyzed the chances of having a premature baby and concluded that the risk factors for her first pregnancy were too small to worry about. But then, out of nowhere, she changed her mind, basing her decision on something she had already ruled out. It was completely out of character for her. So why did she feel the need to keep taking the pills during the party? She didn't drink alcohol, didn't smoke, and visiting the gym or spa wouldn't have affected her if she were in the early stages of pregnancy. I also noticed changes in our daily life. Our sex life had shifted in a way I couldn't quite pinpoint, but something was definitely off. It was as if she was thinking about something else when we made love, or even when we were just having sex. Her attitude had changed too. She became more dismissive toward me, more condescending, as if she had a... I was completely engrossed in planning the weekend getaway, the party, and the anticipation was building. I was even considering a quick fling with a third guy on Sunday morning. My mind was consumed with the details, and I tried to ignore Chris. I bought sexy lingerie, a sheer nightgown, intending to discard them before leaving the hotel. Chris was hovering around me as I packed on Thursday evening. I even had to send him out for milk. He looked like a lost puppy. My body was sore, and I needed to be clean for Chris. I had showered that morning, aiming for a travel-worn look, not a sex-driven one. The weekend felt like the slowest one of my life. I barely worked, ate junk food, and struggled to sleep. The only thing lifting my spirits was preparing dinner for the two of us on Sunday evening. By then, I convinced myself that Paula loved me and wouldn't jeopardize our marriage. We had both agreed that cheating was a line we wouldn't cross. I thought I overreacted. Everything would go back to normal when she walked through that door. I was even whistling to myself. Then she walked in, and I knew, as I parked the car by the house, that everything was off. I looked in the mirror, and everything seemed fine. I looked the same as I had before. No signs of the weekend's events. Even the soreness had almost faded, replaced by a desire for my husband. The illusion shattered before I even closed the door behind me. Chris was peeking into the oven, clearly putting the finishing touches on dinner. He's such a sweet man. I will love him forever. Everything in the house seemed normal, but something was off. Paula was acting strange, and I had a bad feeling. On Wednesday, things took a turn for the worse. I received SMS alerts for any use of our bank cards. Paula had an old card she rarely used, but I still got alerts from it. Just after lunch, I received a notification that $199.95 had been spent at Victoria's Secret using that card. This shocked me for several reasons. First, why was she using that card? It was kept in a safe, so she had to go get it. Second, she hated Victoria's Secret. She always said she looked sexy or naked. I watched her closely on Wednesday evening when she came home. No bags came into the house with her. When I checked the safe at 6 p.m., the card wasn't there. By 8 p.m., it was back that night. I had trouble falling asleep, so around 3 a.m., I left Paula sleeping soundly. First, I went to her car, but I didn't find anything. When I came back into the house, I noticed her small suitcase by the guest room door. Usually, when she goes away, she only pulls it out the night before, not 2 nights in advance. I opened the suitcase, and I found nothing inside. But then I remembered the zipper top compartment. When I opened it, there was a bag from Victoria's Secret. This clearly wasn't meant for me, but for her to take with her. A quick look inside revealed 2 sets of lingerie, a thong, panties, a lace bra, and a sheer nightgown. This didn't prove anything, but it certainly suggested something. It was clear my wife had thoughts of cheating on me. I did what I always do when she's packing. I sat on the bed to talk, but she wasn't there. I was completely engrossed in planning the weekend getaway, the party, and the anticipation was building. I was even considering a quick fling with a third guy on Sunday morning. My mind was consumed with the details, and I tried to ignore Chris. I bought sexy lingerie, a sheer nightgown, intending to discard them before leaving the hotel. Chris was hovering around me as I packed on Thursday evening. I even had to send him out for milk. He looked like a lost puppy. My body was sore, and I needed to be clean for Chris. I had showered that morning, aiming for a travel-worn look, not a sex-driven one. The weekend felt like the slowest one of my life. I barely worked, ate junk food, and struggled to sleep. The only thing lifting my spirits was preparing dinner for the two of us on Sunday evening. By then, I convinced myself that Paula loved me and wouldn't jeopardize our marriage. We had both agreed that cheating was a line we'd never cross. I thought I overreacted. Everything would go back to normal when she walked through that door. I was even whistling to myself. Then she walked in, and I knew, as I parked the car by the house, that everything was off. I looked in the mirror, and everything seemed fine. I looked the same as I had before, no signs of the weekend's events. Even the soreness had almost faded, replaced by a desire for my husband. The illusion shattered before I even closed the door behind me. Chris was peeking into the oven, clearly putting the finishing touches on dinner. He's such a sweet man. I will love him forever. Everything in the house seemed normal, but something was off. Paula was acting strange, and I had a bad feeling. On Wednesday, things took a turn for the worse. I received SMS alerts for any use of our bank cards. Paula had an old card she rarely used, but I still got alerts from it. Just after lunch, I received a notification that $199.95 had been spent at Victoria's Secret using that card. This shocked me for several reasons. First, why was she using that card? It was kept in a safe, so she had to go get it. Second, she hated Victoria's Secret. She always said she looked sexy or naked. I watched her closely on Wednesday evening when she came home. No bags came into the house with her. When I checked the safe at 6:00 p.m., the card wasn't there. By 8:00 p.m., it was back that night. I had trouble falling asleep, so around 3:00 a.m., I left Paula sleeping soundly. First, I went to her car, but I didn't find anything. When I came back into the house, I noticed her small suitcase by the guest room door. Usually, when she goes away, she only pulls it out the night before, not 2 nights in advance. I opened the suitcase and I found nothing inside. But then I remembered the zipper top compartment. When I opened it, there was a bag from Victoria's Secret. This clearly wasn't meant for me, but for her to take with her. A quick look inside revealed 2 sets of lingerie, a thong, panties, a lace bra, and a sheer nightgown. This didn't prove anything, but it certainly suggested something. It was clear my wife had thoughts of cheating on me. I did what I always do when she's packing. I sat on the bed to talk, but she wasn't there. Dave's voice shifted from friendly to professional. Who is this person? And what do you think they're doing? I didn't want to drag Dave into my personal life, so I asked, why does that matter? There are different ways to approach this. Dave replied, I need to know your goal before I can advise you. Unfortunately, that made sense. I began, This stays between us, okay? He grumbled. All right. I continued. Paula went away for the weekend with Steph and the girls. I have a bad feeling that Steph convinced her to cheat on me. I heard a long sigh before Dave came back on the line. We need a private investigator, he said. I've got someone for that. Send me the name of the hotel and a photo of Paula. I'll set it up for you. I owe you one, so this will be on the house. With that, he hung up. Clearly, this was all business. I emailed Dave everything he asked for. He called me back shortly after. The private investigator will check everything out. We'll have a report for you by Tuesday. My advice is to try to forget about it until then. Don't go near the hotel, and only call Paula at the times you've agreed on. We need you to act as normal as possible. I know it's tough, and it might feel like I'm asking you to let your wife cheat, but sometimes life throws crap at you, and you have to deal with it. On Friday, I actually went to work, but my boss sent me home because I looked unfit to drive. I spent most of the day wallowing in self-pity, then went to a bar, had a beer, and came back to watch a football game. I couldn't tell you who was playing. let alone the score. Saturday, I worked in the yard, ate some pizza, and went to bed early. On Sunday, I went shopping for something to make for dinner. Even if my marriage fell apart by Tuesday, I at least wanted to enjoy the rest of the weekend at home. The hotel only had 4 rooms booked. Steph came over to me and whispered, "Would you do me a favor and leave so I can just sleep with Chris this weekend?" I looked at her and said, "Why would I do that? This is my little adventure. Please don't ruin it for me." She took a deep breath and grabbed Mark's hand, placing it over mine. "Mark, take care of my little Paula," she said before leaving. Mark and I went up to the room, and it was amazing. We had just entered and were engaging in some light touches when the phone rang. It was Steph. She said they were heading to the spa and asked us to hurry. I quickly went to the bathroom to change into my new bikini, which left little to the imagination and clearly gave Mark some ideas. He suggested we be late for the spa. "Take it easy, big guy. You'll have plenty of time for that." I teased him with a smile. The afternoon at the spa was fantastic. Dinner was great, too. After a few drinks, Mark and I retreated to the room. The sex was amazing. Mark was good. He lasted long and recovered quickly. The next morning, I went to breakfast feeling his presence in 2 ways. Some still in my stomach, and the rest leaving a mark on my clean underwear. Saturday went almost the same. Except this time I was with Tony in the morning. We went to the adults-only indoor pool. The evening was nearly identical to the previous one, but this time Tony ripped my clothes off. By Sunday morning, my body was sore and exhausted, but I had enjoyed every minute. After these 2 nights, I realized I was ready to commit fully to family life, and I wouldn't need anyone else but Chris. Hopefully, we'd have our 4 kids. The future children. I dropped off Steph, Mark, and Mike at the same spot where I had picked them up on Friday and got home around 4 p.m. The idea of sleeping with a 3rd guy was now out of the question, so I just started talking and told him the truth. It started around the time we decided to have kids. I want your children so badly, but I wanted to have some fun one last time before I fully committed to motherhood. This weekend was supposed to be my farewell to that life. You knew I was a virgin when we met, but my friends were wild. What you didn't know is that I had planned to join them in their adventures. But then I met you. I threw myself into us, and we both loved it. But motherhood loomed. I felt like I'd missed out on something. So, I talked to Steph about it for the first time. Chris interrupted me. "I knew that woman pushed you into this." I cleared my throat and replied, "She didn't." "Chris," he said. "Chris, she tried to talk me out of it when I refused. She agreed to help to make sure I didn't end up with someone who might hurt me, and at least tried to keep it hidden from you, but she told me not to do it, and she said I was crazy. She'll kill me when she finds out you know, and that you're going to divorce me. She admired you for protecting and loving me." My tears returned. The most noticeable thing was that Chris didn't move in the past. If I cried, he would hug me. Today, it had no effect on him, and I didn't miss that. "Keep going, please." Said so, we were with 4 men. I hate to tell you this, but you deserve the truth. On Friday night, I was with one, and on Saturday, another. The sex was good, but no better than with you. It was just different, and that's what got to me. I'm sorry for doing this. I'm sorry for putting you in this position, especially in front of our friends. Even though it doesn't mean much now, I'm sorry. I got caught and ruined what we had. I sat still staring at the floor, hoping Chris would tell me he forgave me, but deep down, knowing the blow to my marriage and happiness was about to hit. I could feel Chris staring at me, but I resisted the urge to look up. I knew I would see something awful on his face and his eyes. I knew his words would cut me deeply. "You've been acting strange with me for months," he said. I took a deep breath. I thought I had been careful enough to treat him the same as always, but clearly I hadn't. "You started hiding your plans for the party about 6 weeks ago. That was around the time I met those 4 men. You began closing your eyes when we made love. You started saying things like, Take me, you'd never said before. Then you got a message. I'm guessing it was from Steph, and you practically ignored me. You had this dreamy look in your eyes, and I literally wasn't even in the room with you. You never answered me after getting those messages. Then you went and bought something from Victoria's Secret using your old bank card, thinking I wouldn't notice. I went looking for it and saw what you bought. I knew what you were planning when you left on Friday. I knew something was wrong. I convinced myself you wouldn't go through with it, but I had to be sure. That's why Dave arranged for a private investigator to go to the hotel. I'll get the report on Tuesday, then I'll know if you lied to me. How much more could I cry? Would I have gone through with my plans, even though I hadn't outright lied to him? I had, however, given a vague account of what I'd done. The investigation report could have been devastating, detailing things like the four of us sunbathing topless at the adults-only pool. I had to ask the question, even though I already knew the answer. What are we going to do next? I asked. You know it's over between us. Since your parents are still alive, I think you should go stay with them, she said. I'll stay here because this is the only roof I have over my head. I'll ask Dave to send over a lawyer to draw up the divorce papers, and we can sign them, she continued. We'll sell the house and split everything equally if you agree not to fight this. We can file for divorce based on irreconcilable differences, split everything evenly, no spousal support, and no need for counseling. If you resist, she added, I'll use the report from the private investigator. It won't change the division of assets, but the information will become public, and everyone will know. What could I do? I said, all right, and started packing my things. As Paula walked out of the house, the enormity of what had happened hit me. My mother had passed away 5 years ago, and my father just a year after that. I was an only child, so I had no family left, no wife, and certainly no children in the near future. Add to that the fact that in 6 weeks the house would be sold, and I would be without a home. I cried, mourning everything I had lost because of my wife's fleeting desire. I sat in the car, staring at the house that was once my home. At that moment, I had no more tears left. When I arrived at my parents' house, it felt like I was starting over, but there would be even less sympathy there if that was possible. As I was leaving, I called Steph. Steph! I sobbed into the phone, and the tears started streaming down my cheeks again. I told you this was a terrible idea, and getting caught was always the biggest risk. Steph's concern was focused on the how. Apparently I'd been distracted for weeks, both at home and during sex. He got a text notification when I made the purchase at Victoria's Secret. He was so suspicious that he hired a private investigator to check the hotel. I messed up. I told him the truth but left out the details. If he sees what I did and how I was dressed, it's over. Any small chance of forgiveness will vanish once he gets that report. There'll be no going back. Oh God, Steph, what have I done? At this point, I was completely incoherent. Where are you going now? Steph asked. My parents, I said. They won't let you stay. You know that, Steph stated, stating the obvious. You'll have to come to me when they tell you to leave. My parents showed me no sympathy. I had made my own choices, and they told me to live with them. I moved in with Steph and began trying to rebuild my life piece by piece as it had been before. A log, Chris sent a copy of the investigation report, along with the divorce papers. Paula and Chris no longer spoke. Paula didn't contest the divorce, and the decision was made within 10 weeks, with the finalization happening 3 months later. Once the house was sold, Chris left town. The last thing Paula heard about him was that he had become a long-haul truck driver and left California. She had no way to contact him. Paula stayed with Steph for a few weeks before getting her own apartment. The itch that had driven her to give up her marriage was gone and never returned. She still met up with the girls, but kept her vow of celibacy. She longed for Chris to come back and for everything to be fixed. She dreamed of whispering in his ear, "I'm not taking the pills anymore." But this time she wanted that statement to be sincere. Deep down, she knew it would never happen, and that she would never be with Chris again. Now she was saving herself for her husband, and if he wasn't there, she would be alone. Thank you for listening until the end. See you in the next episode of English Epic. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.